the aftermath of Oppenheimer and Barbie, which is called Barbenheimer, if I'm correct.
Barbenheimer, yeah.
Barbenheimer is gone for a couple of weeks, or I should say a week now. There's a
We
lot to
just
be.
ended the second
Yeah.
weekend.
Okay,
Yeah.
second weekend. Okay. So there's a lot to be talked about right now. We just want to talk about our general thoughts about the films, what impact it's had on the film industry, which is a big impact of it, considering what's going on right now, the writer's strike and the actor strike that just started happening a couple of weeks, and just what's going to happen with the future with these films. So, yeah, here we are. Let's start. Let's first talk about our thoughts with the movies. Which movie should we start
Let's go
with?
in alphabetical order. Let's just start with Barbie.
Okay, we'll start with Barbie,
all right.
since I feel like that one has a lot of controversy to it. What is our thoughts on Barbie?
I thought it was fun. I mean, what direction can you really go with a Barbie movie besides pure absurdity? And I feel like at least they went with that, right? They didn't get tied up trying to, I guess, explain like why things were happening. They just kind of told a story as it was without no questions asked. They were just like, this is Barbie, this is the movie, there you go.
I think one of the genius things about Barbie is that it was able to capture a cultural moment, and like it was able to get everybody kind of out of their homes to come to the movies, and like not just watch a movie but to participate in the culture around this specific film. Like everybody's out there wearing pink, doing their whole Barbie fits, like posting on social media, just to, everybody getting excited over this movie. And I think that the marketing around the movie was done so well in order to not just be like hey, come watch this movie, but like, hey, be a part of this cultural moment.
The marketing for this film should have its own videos. Like there could be like hundreds of them, because I'm just thinking of all the activations and all the sponsorships, and it's like they're well into the hundreds. Like this team worked their ass off to market the film, which is crazy. You don't see that anymore. I feel like something like this maybe wasn't so rare like maybe 10-15 years ago, but like now it is, just because like we've seen this downward trend in cinema. So it was just like really refreshing to see like Warner Bros. Bet it all on like this film specifically, Barbie. Why? I don't know. They saw something in it and it paid off. So, that's why there was a shortage in pink paint.
Yeah. I definitely think the marketing was interesting. I think advertisement was so weird because, I mean, to be fair, I didn't stop watching the trailers until I was kind of recommending this movie, but I didn't expect, like, I feel like what I was advertising in the movie and what I got were complete different things. Like it seemed more friendly in the advertisement, besides maybe the trailer.
No, keep going.
Besides maybe this moment where you see the guys try to slap her butt. I think that's the only thing that I was like, okay, maybe we get a little bit gruesome. And then I did see it was PG-13, so I knew it was going to be a little bit more mature, but it kind of came off this innocent vibe. And then when you watch the movie, it was a little bit more they went more depth, and then some ways they kind of went a little bit too political. So
I think that is something that I did hear in the reception of Barbie, of like there was a little bit of discomfort with like parents taking their small children to see Barbie and not like fully realizing that it's not like, even though it's Barbie, it's not necessarily a movie that is intentionally made for kids. Although I do think that that's part of the issue of the film itself, like the marketing and everything behind the film to like get people into the theater, I thought was done very well. But then when you come to the film itself, I think that there's some criticisms that you can start throwing in there. I think that it was a little bit all over the place, I would say, as far as who is this movie exactly for, like what is the intended audience and who are they trying to reach out to, and so I can see why some parents might have been a bit like this isn't really what I was expecting.
I think that's more of like, it's like whoever edits the trailers kind of has like the power to frame like what the audience will think it's about, right? I mean, look at like a lot of movies out there will have like two trailers with like very different tone, right? I mean, one example is like Killers of the Flower Moon, which Martin Scorsese, his latest film that's gonna come out soon. The first trailer was very like prestige tone, like very serious, and like a lot of like the cinephiles are like, oh yeah, like F yeah, like Martin Scorsese, we love this. The second trailer that came out was definitely for a more general audience. Like it felt like a lot more actiony, and then like the cinephiles were like, wait, this is weird, this isn't like what we thought it was going to be. But then more people like kind of seemed to catch on to the second trailer and were like, oh yeah, this is cool, I'm interested in like seeing this film. And I think Barbie, it's, I mean, how do you really like capture like what it was in a trailer? Like OC said, it's like kind of all over the place, but it's also because it kind of provides something unique that I think you don't see like super often in films. And like, who is this made for? Like, to be honest, it's a coming of age film for like millennial women, like people like late 20s, early 30s already, because it's like, it still feels like you're coming of age when you're like at that age already, right? And I feel like that was the kind of the vibe that came from the trailers, where you can see like America Ferrera in it, because it's like, you know, that she's like the other like main character in the film. So I, at least on Twitter, I saw that a lot of people were like, oh, like it's exactly as I expected, like it's a coming of age film for like millennial women. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the vibe that I got. If other people were led astray, like that sucks. But I can see, because Barbie is a toy, it seems like it's a property for children, that could maybe mislead like some like people with families. But yeah, I think that's just like OC said, it's kind of all over the place, so it's hard to really like encapsulate that in like one trailer alone, really.
Right.
I guess I mean, that's true, because I feel like if there's anything going more into the movie, I feel like the third act kind of had a different, like it seemed like it had a different plot within, like it seemed like you had two plots in the movie, which is, I guess you can say it has to do with Ken, but then it's like, yeah, it's interesting. So I feel like you almost get two different stories, and then those different stories kind of tell different own movies within itself. So I mean, it's funny because in some ways it does umbrella up the whole womanhood aspect to it, which was one thing I liked about the movie, and that's something that I found interesting. But the fact that it was sort of disjointed, and then it just seemed like, because they're addressing more messages with this side, and then it's like, okay, and then like even the ending feel like it had two different, like there was so many different endings where it's like, okay, this is how we're ending it. No, I realize I want to be a human now. It's like, okay. So it was just like, there was just a lot of things going on, and it's just, this movie for me personally, it's frustrating because there are so many things I love about this movie, in terms of like the way they adapted the whole Barbie place, the way they the acting, I think
the set design I love. I'm like really glad that it wasn't just set in LA, because I was like, the set looks so cool, they need to keep it in Barbie land, because like this is the coolest looking part of the movie. So when it was mostly there, I was like, okay, thank God, because LA looks horrible. Like
exactly.
in the film, I was like, ugh.
So you got stuff like that, you know. I think Ryan Gosling's performance was really amazing, and you know, even the jokes with like the breaking the fourth wall and referencing the movie. So I like that. But I wasn't a big fan, especially with the whole like, we got to destroy the patriarchy message, just because the way it was framed here. And you know, I don't have a movie making criticisms about patriarchy or even like how men have been toxic, but it was kind of framed here in a way that was a little bit too much belittling men, and it was just kind of this thing where it's like, it felt more of like a gender war instead of it being about like equality. It would seem more about, okay, we need to have the supremacy kind of aspect towards it. And
it's hard to cover something like the patriarchy, because like it's tied to like thousands of years of history and colonialism and like this that. You can't really like kind of condense it to something in a fucking Barbie movie. They did mention it, like in the end Barbie herself admitted like Barbie land is like not even like that fair either. Like the Barbies have been charged, like maybe like the Kens haven't really been able to figure out who they are, right? And like there was that little tidbit at the end to kind of like explain away like, yeah, you're right, you know, there should be more equality between the Barbies and the Kens. But it was like, it was very much like kind of like a very quick, like almost afterthought, but they did address it. It was just kind of like
they addressed it, but I feel like they downplay it, because even when they were like, oh, could Kens have a seat in the chair, they're like, oh, you guys could work as janitors. And then the joke was like, the Kens will have much rights that the women will have in the real world. And it's just like, there's kind of a downplay on it. So
it's
I
not
think,
worse than anything that's been said in like Mad Men. I mean, I don't really care.
I mean, I don't know. I think personally for me, it's just like stuff like that where it's like, that's where I feel like it was all over the place. And I really wish if they were going to tackle these issues.
How did that make you feel, Chuku?
I think if they can tackle it in a way, in a more nuanced.
To getting it.
Getting what?
That's just like how women feel like in almost every other piece of media.
I mean, I don't know.
It's kind of a joke. Like it's turning it on its head. It's like we're discussing it right now.
I guess in some ways, but I guess there's I just don't know how much of them being depicted completely. Like I will agree, there's a lot of medias where they depict women as one-sided, but I feel like for the most part, they would show a more counterbalance. Like this movie, it was literally just a lot of it was just negative. Yeah, there was no positive light I can see any male character, if that was any sense. But
I think that's the point.
I mean, if that's the point, that's fine. But I guess the issue there is just like, I just don't know what's the message within that, if that's the case.
I think it's more of like, I think it's like kind of a joke, really. I'm not taking it too seriously. I think it's pretty funny. Plus, you know, one-dimensional or not, like, I feel like Ryan Gosling is like one of the best part of the movie, like the best part of the movie, even though he's like evil Ken, blah, blah, blah. Like they really utilized him really well. I think speaking of performances, like I'm really happy that they really showcased his comedy chops. Like I've been like rooting for him since like The Nice Guys. Like I've definitely like been one of those people like, oh, watch The Nice Guys on Netflix. Cause like people don't really know Ryan Gosling's got really great timing and he's really funny. And I feel like even though he's part of the reason why I think the movie is kind of all over the place, because like a lot of the focus does go on him at times where I'm like, oh, this is getting serious. Like, why is he like doing all this? But it's still like really enjoyable to watch because he is so talented.
Yeah, he's very entertaining. I guess for me, it's just like, I guess a personal preference for me is like, if we're going to talk about those kinds of issues, it'd be better if there's a more nuanced perspective and it's not just completely like a jaded view, especially if there's sort of this kind of like push towards a certain way of coming to it. But besides all of that, like, again, it is a very, like I said, I did enjoy the movie. I thought it was very entertaining. I even like some of the musicals, you know, it's spectacle wise, it's a very good thing to watch as a spectacle. But I can understand, like, if you were a father to bring your daughter, like, imagine if you're a father, you brought your daughter to this movie and just everything is like hating on men. You're like, ah. Like, I can imagine the uncomfortability of it. And I can definitely see where that could be an aspect of it where, because of the way it's commercialized, it can feel very like you came for one movie and then you came to a different movie kind of a thing. So I can get into that. But OC, you were about to say something real quick.
Yeah. So basically, just on those notes that you guys kind of hit, I can definitely see the intention behind having the film done in such a way where it's almost a reverse, I suppose, of the history that a lot of women, I can imagine, have felt with Hollywood, where women in a lot of big movies are kind of portrayed as these one-dimensional characters that don't have any reasonable nuance, and it feels weird watching this like fake like perception of what a woman is from a man's perspective in these films. And then this is, I suppose, if it is done intentionally, which I hope it is, because that's how it came across, and I think that's the intention.
It's a bit of satire for sure,
right? Like having men be in a position where they are watching characters who don't really like map onto reality in the way that men see it, like from a woman's perspective. Like I will say that with that, I think if that's the intention, then I can only assume or reason from that like the intention is that it's not really supposed to be a movie that men
For kids. Oh,
for,
it's not,
for
but
men. Yeah, no, but like for kids, that's actually a different one. But for men, it's not really supposed to be something that appeals to men, right? If that is the intention. And I think that possibly feeds into the satire of the movie. And if that's the case, then I can applaud that. Like, I think that's very well done if that's all done intentionally. And I think I haven't heard Greta Gerwig talk about that, but if she talks about that in reference to this film, then
the interesting aspect of this movie is that she didn't just wrote it, but the guy who also wrote what's it called? Dang it, now I'm forgetting that one divorce movie that had
story.
Yeah, that guy also wrote it. So I'm almost curious on like what aspects she wrote, that which she wrote and what he wrote, because it's just like, I think for me, which is such where I kind of do have a little falling apart, and you know, maybe you can say it's a comedy and sometimes I have loopholes, is like I just can't imagine a world where if Kens are just that dumb and then these Barbies are like strong-minded women, they will allow the patriarchy to slip in. It just seems a little bit odd for me in that kind of world.
It does leans into the, like OC said, like the irony of it, like the satire of it, right? Like it's you see your likeness in a film, right? You feel misrepresented, correct?
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the kind of experience that she was trying to
right.
convey.
That's like fine. There's literally no man in that movie. Like a dude slaps Barbie on the butt in broad daylight in front of like
exactly. No man would obviously
the
do
reality
that.
of something like that happening in Los Angeles. Like unless that person is like a mentally ill homeless person.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's kind of it's kind of out of, you know, but like if it's done with the intention of making guys feel like, oh, this isn't really an accurate representation of who a man is and blah 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 blah, then I can see why that works in the film.
I think the fact that you are up in arms about it kind of tells me that she kind of did her job,
right?
I mean, that was the intention from
you think the intention was just to make men feel uncomfortable?
I think so.
I think part of it was to misrepresent, to understand like how like a lot of women have felt misrepresented in movies and films. Even now, like sometimes I'll see like a female character on screen and I'm like, I don't know why, but I just like don't really like what they did there. Like this person sucks, and I'm like, oh, written by a man, and it's just like it happens like so often, right? And it's like and it's like that. you can say like, Greta Gerwig, a woman, did write these men, and she misrepresented, and she did like misrepresent y'all, and like, you know, that's like kind of part of like the overarching joke, really. And it's a joke, you know, like we can laugh about it, like laugh now, cry later, because it is, you know, part of a bigger issue, but like at least it's just like poking fun at that.
I'm fine with that. I guess to me where it comes with like, or the story, this is where the comedy and the like writing kind of comes in, where the error for me is just the idea of like, if they are that dumb, how does the Barbies who are like brilliant be able to allow that? That's the part where it comes a little weird for me, where it's like, what? How does that work? I can't imagine.
Into something else with I think that they also had a little bit of an issue with the audience as far as age that I mentioned earlier, where it's like it felt like this was a kids movie to some people who saw the advertising, and then to other people it felt like it would be more adult. And in the movie there was a weird range of like adult topics and themes mixed with a lot of like really childish stuff that really would only appeal, I suppose, to kids. I think that part of that was in the fact that in the real world with the Mattel company, they were like all cartoonish, even though it was in the real world. And I think that part of that was just it felt a little weird. It's like, okay, like they're doing this whole like goofy run around chasing scene. Like, is this for adults in the same way that like we have this super complex reversal of like the roles of men and women in film, and the satirical take that is supposed to like evoke a certain response from the audience, and like on top of that you also have this like wacky chase scene,
like slapstick humor,
slapstick
like
humor,
with like physical comedy,
right? And then we turn around to like have like beach off jokes that like, just, like
Oh yeah,
I know it does feel like sometimes Will Ferrell didn't even really need to be in the movie.
I agree.
Yeah, honestly, like Will Ferrell is great, but I don't know if he served this film very well.
Yeah, and for that I agree with you. There are some parts that do feel like disjointed, and that namely is like, it really is like, oh, is this the real world or is it not? And it's very, I don't think it, even though it's the real world, like everything about it is like really stylized. Like it's not really anything that would happen in real life ever. Even in the real world, she meets like the dead creator of Barbie, and it's like, okay, all right, for the sake of storytelling, I'll accept it. And that's kind of like what you kind of have to do with this film. But yeah, you're right. There are parts that are disjointed.
But yeah, I think before we like turn this into a full-on Barbie review,
yeah, sure. I was gonna say
we
were
need
talking
to
so much about this one.
refocus a little bit. I will say that like going back to what the effects of this film is on the entire landscape, with everything like the writer's strike happening right now, the actor's strike happening right now, it is interesting. Looking forward to the future of film. Apparently Mattel wants to do a whole line of toy films now that kind of circle around their products, and they want to have this like whole Mattel universe.
Polly Pocket, Barney.
Yeah, seriously.
Some really.
I think Uno's one of them, right?
Maybe, probably.
Uno.
Does Mattel also owns like Ouija board? I think. Like there's like the commercial Ouija boards.
Movies about Ouija,
I know. I want to see a better one. I think actually one of my favorite memes that I've seen on Twitter is like, oh, like this must be how like Oppenheimer felt after like Greta Gerwig like reads that all the Mattel like approved like movies that are on the roster now.
Yeah. Like what have you done? What have
just because
Greta Gerwig
we could, doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what happens, but this movie is probably gonna cross $1 billion. Barbie, it's like at 750 million right now.
Dang.
Yeah. So it's probably gonna cross $1 billion. And that's definitely gonna mean Mattel gets more movies out. So Barbie has a lot of effects in the future that we can't necessarily predict right now, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what the future holds. That being said, transitioning to Oppenheimer a little bit, because obviously this whole event, this movie event, was Barbenheimer, which is like Barbie and Oppenheimer. So you have kind of two sides of society,
same
almost
coin
of the same coin, or yeah, where it's like you have this like, you know, super bubbly girl power like centric movie, and then you have this like dour, down
one of the greatest war crimes in the history of the
talking
world.
in rooms. Yeah. So it's so interesting to me that I feel like this speaks to Christopher Nolan as a director, that he is able to generate so much hype around a film with this kind of subject matter. I think it's just a testament to his skills as a director, and it's so interesting to watch, because everybody who is, you know, fan of filmmaking, fan of the movies, I feel like there is this implicit trust in Christopher Nolan that he's going to, like, whatever he touches, he's gonna like put his absolute best into it. And so I think that kind of is part of what goes into the buildup of something like Oppenheimer, where it's like, okay, for a lot of people who maybe have never heard of Oppenheimer or have heard of him but are not have never necessarily been like super interested enough to like go and do like a ton of historical study on him specifically, for you to decide that that's going to be the subject of my next film, and for everybody to like be so hyped and so excited about it, I think that's just it's incredible to watch. It's incredible and the movie itself was incredible to watch. I loved it.
Yeah, this movie was very interesting for me because to me it kind of felt like a Black Mirror episode in a sense where it's like somebody, you know, they want this sort of like they get this wish where they have technology and you kind of see the consequences. And for me, that part really stood out to me. Was mainly, as much as, well, him creating Atomic Blonde was an interesting experience, but the politics after to it made me really felt like sad and depressed for this guy. And it's just like, it just seemed like everything was just going downhill. And then like that scene that stood out with me the most is that one moment where he's talking to the president and he's like, dude, I created something that sucks. And the president's all like, get this baby out of here. I'm like, bruh, like this is just like just everything going out. It's just, it sucks.
Truman was like, he does not have that dog in him. Get him out of my sight.
But one thing that it's really beautiful that Christopher Nolan did with this film is just like the sound design. Because like you always get this like tension and thrilling and making you scared and everything. And another thing that was so interesting about this film for me was just, it's a 3-hour film, but it didn't feel like that because everything just feels, the way it's edited, it's like everything's just fast paced and you're just cutting everything like chop, chop, chop. And it's just
like going back
the way
and
you're
forth.
able, exactly. For like, because for me, I generally speaking, and you're right about this being like Christopher Nolan, just because you just trust Christopher Nolan when you watch it. Like if I was hearing about, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of like history. So if I heard a movie like this, I wouldn't be intrigued by it. But like Christopher Nolan knows how to take these kinds of like, you know, sciencey historical topics that are generally boring and know how to make it so captivating that you just want to know every second, you want to hear what's going on and then play with good music and everything. It's just a beautiful thing in general. But
right, like I don't think I've ever watched a movie that depicts a cabinet hearing and I'm like interested in it. Like that's so fascinating to me.
It's just a testament to his storytelling. I feel like every project he's made so far has culminated into this film. Even Tenet. I think a lot of people have been kind of ragging on Tenet now that Oppenheimer is out. Like I feel like people feel brave enough to be like, oh, like Tenet sucked. I don't think it sucked. And I mean, some parts sucked, like the sound design and like not being able to understand what anyone was saying. But I feel like that experimental storytelling in Tenet helped him to, I guess, juxtapose the making of the bomb with that hearing and like, you know, Oppenheimer's personal life, right? Like we can't have Oppenheimer without Tenet and all the other movies that Christopher Nolan has made. And it's really beautiful to see, because I feel like with a lot of filmmakers, they don't get better. Usually they get worse, all right? Like I'm not gonna name any names, but Christopher Nolan has always been consistently like raising the bar, and it's really exciting to see because now like he can choose whatever project he wants to make and make it, like, right? Like this success, you know, I don't want to like jump the gun and talk about like what the effects of this film are going to be already, but I mean, he can now like make whatever he wants. I mean, he can already kind of make whatever he wants. The fact that he was like, okay, I'm going to make this like movie about a book, American Prometheus, where the majority of it is like a hearing. And I guess the studios were like, okay, that's fine. And like he was able to do it, and it's a huge hit, which is like crazy. Just shows how talented he is.
Yeah, it really does. And I think all of that, like all of his past films have kind of informed and built on one another as far as like what we saw in this film, like the whole black and white, the decision to go like back and forth between black and white and color, and how the black and white was this more grounded view of the character, and the color was how he saw himself, this idealistic view of how he saw himself. The black and white was how the world kind of sees him, and it's more. I think I don't know if it was Yuchuku or somebody else who mentioned after we saw the movie that it was interesting that it was black and white because this was like a more objective view of who he was as a person. It's like there's no fluff around it. It's like very, very clear lines here. Whereas with the color, it's like, oh, okay, there's this idealistic, idealized, hopeful version of how he sees himself.
I thought, sorry to interrupt, but I thought the person who said it, she was trying to imply that the black and white is sort of like because it was mainly focusing on Robert Downey Jr.'s character, and it was supposed to represent kind of that view of like, you know, you're either good or bad, you know, how the media portrays you, while the color is more like show the complexity of like this is very ambiguous, you know, this is what it is and whatnot. So that was kind of, at least that was our speculation or interpretation of the situation. But yeah, that's another interesting factor that played into that.
And when you look at like his past history of films, with like Tenet and like the whole disjointed time storytelling aspect, and then a film like Memento where he uses black and white versus color very intentionally to tell the audience, or to help the audience catch on to like where they are in the story. I think all of that kind of just like feeds into what we're seeing now, and it kind of just makes me so much more excited for what we're gonna see from him in the future. It's like, okay, he's just gonna keep honing his craft, and it just makes me more excited for what we're gonna get from him.
It's really cool because it's like, you know, you can see growth, right? And that's like,
right.
You know, you can't just put him in a box. Like, he's been able to do so many different things like within his filmmaking that it's just like, it's just really impressive and really cool to see. I haven't seen really like any criticisms or negative stuff about Oppenheimer. I think, you know, a lot of people are saying like this could be his magnum opus, you know, and it's like a lot of the actors in here, their best performance. I mean, look at Robert Downey Jr. Like, what do you think could like top this? Like maybe Zodiac, but I don't know about that.
No, I think Robert Downey Jr. honestly, like Cillian Murphy killed it. Emily Blunt killed it.
Rami Malek, when the changed the whole tone of the hearing, like that was like, that was a really sick moment for me. But Emily Blunt.
Yeah, Emily Blunt is such a terrific. Everybody killed it in their role in this film. But like for me, when Robert Downey Jr. cracks at the end of the movie, it's like that was the moment where I was like, oh my god, this is an Oscar nomination at the very least for me. For Robert Downey Jr., that's what I felt. So,
yeah, and like his whole cast is like, it's a really funny ensemble because it's all really familiar faces. It's like,
I know.
It's like Benny Safdie, one of the kids from the Naked Brothers band, Josh Peck,
the guy from The Boys, Huey.
Huey,
what's the name of the guy from Pearl Harbor? He did a really fantastic job.
Hartnett?
Josh Hartnett, which is, I love him because he's like kind of grown out of his like pretty boy looks, and like now he's like got this, like, he still looks great, but like he like has like a more serious role. And I feel like Nolan kind of gave all of these like actors like kind of maybe like a second chance, or like you know, roles that they can really like feel like seen in. Yeah, like for real. There's even one of the kids is like, or he's not even a kid anymore, but like whichever is like his scientist friend that wears the glasses, that was like one of the elves from the Tim Allen Santa Claus movie.
Oh wow.
It's such a random ensemble and I love it so much. Everyone had like a standout moment, to be honest, and like to be able to manage like an ensemble of that size. We haven't even mentioned like Matt Damon, which is crazy because he also did an amazing performance. Casey Affleck in a downright terrifying role, honestly. That was so tense seeing him on screen.
And Paul,
was it
who was the guy? I forgot his name. The guy who played in the Amazing Spider-Man as Harry Osborn. Dane DeHaan.
Dane DeHaan.
Oh,
Yeah,
Dane DeHaan
he
was
did a
great.
good job. Yes.
Everyone that was like in the hearings, like when he was getting interrogated, Cillian Murphy. I don't remember like any of those actors' names. But yeah, terrific cast. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the only criticisms that I heard about the movie is I don't know if it was a criticism of the film itself or the reaction to the film, but I think it goes or gears more towards like the political implications of the film, where some people kind of view this as positive propaganda regarding the atomic bomb and World War II.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this quite brilliantly on Christopher Nolan's part was not at all positive propaganda for
Really?
the
I don't
war.
know how
I
they
don't think it
interpreted
was.
that. Yeah, I don't know how they got that.
I don't necessarily see that either. I think that I think if you view this, I don't know. I don't want to be insulting, but it seems that if you have a more surface level view of the film, where because Oppenheimer is the protagonist, he's like the main character that we follow, everything that he does is supposed to be interpreted from a positive lens, then I think then you can come away with some view that, oh, everything that he did was positive, so this is a pro propaganda, like a atomic bomb film. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that
it's
more the opposite completely.
It's a snapshot in time of like what was happening personally, like in his life. I think, yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like it's kind of like a surface level interpretation to be like, oh, there needs to be like shed some light on like how horrifying, it was that they, obviously bombed Japan and all that. But like there are films that cover that, like Japanese films that cover that, and it would like honestly diminish that for Nolan to like include that in this film, especially because it's like based on American Prometheus, so it's not like it's an encapsulating picture that's like trying to like get everything that was going on at the time. Like it's based on a book, so it's
Exactly.
like it's not like, and it's in no way like promoting like USA, like definitely not. Like after they hear like of like everything that happened on the radio, there's that scene where like Cillian Murphy like does like the speech to like the crowd of like everyone at what was that whole area called? It was like Los something.
Los Palos.
Yeah, something like that. And like you can tell just from like the sound design and like how like it was so quiet, you could hear like a pin drop, and then he like tells the joke and you can hear like a woman screaming, and it's like it's a lot more terrifying than even like a lot of like horror films that I've seen this year, like that scene alone. And that just like exemplifies like how horrified like Oppenheimer himself was over like basically the implications of like what he did, and so yeah, it is strange if someone thinks it's painting this all in like a positive light, and it especially like makes the government and like America look kind of sus, because the whole thing like is tied to like the Cold War and like communism, and like how like a lot of it was like unfairly doing all those like witch hunts and then things like that. But I don't think this was it's not a positive spin on America, that's for sure.
Right. And actually, like now that I think about it, Christopher Nolan is British, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay, actually it's funny, he's grew up in one of his parents is from America, and then the other parents Britain, so he grew up in both cultures.
Okay, interesting. But yeah, I don't think that, like, there are a couple of moments where like even the line of like, oh, let's not bomb this city because me and my wife vacation there, like stuff like that, and like the delegating about like how many people need to die and stuff like that. the whole line of give Los the place was called Los Alamos, where they were, about how they should give it back to the Indians, and they were like, nope, we're not gonna do
They're like,
that.
what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the American way to be fair to marginalized groups, and it's pretty obvious throughout the film.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, it feels like a reductionist view to kind of paint this as a pro-America propaganda film.
Yeah. As far as criticisms, the only criticism I've heard was just that it felt like the movie could have ended quicker, and it felt like it almost felt like the politics could be a separate film in some ways. So that was sort of criticisms there. But overall, it was like it was more like, even the person who reviewed it, he didn't like take it like, oh my god, it sucks because of that. It was anything. It was just like, yeah, this could have been more smoother, but overall, I enjoyed myself, kind of a thing.
I mean, it's the most boring part of the book. I mean, not that I've read it, but like everyone agrees, like that whole hearing is like hard to get through in the book, right? And to juxtapose it with like everything that was going on in Los Alamos and have it like turn into this like crescendo really was like, again, like really good storytelling. Like having it played out for you like at the same time was kind of just a way to deliver the story.
Wait, so I'm curious, how's this movie doing the box office right now?
Really good, which is I mean,
I think it's about to hit 500 million. Which, you know, but like for this second weekend, I think it broke a record for the biggest second weekend for a rated R film. So and I heard, so you know, the movie about Elvis, one of the biggest like rock stars of all time, just after 2 weeks, Oppenheimer has made more money than that film did in its entire run.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is a movie about Elvis, the musician, a rock star. And that was like, movie might have also been rated R, but still, like, this movie is rated R.
Yeah.
And also crazy. I saw something saying that like both Barbie and Oppenheimer had a record, second weekend reduction or whatever it's called.
Yeah, second weekend drop off.
It had a record low second weekend drop off. It was only about like 40% for each of them, which is really good because it's like pretty bad. It's like worse than that for like most films.
Yeah. So
I feel like that kind of brings us into why we think both were such a hit at the box office and what this could mean for the future of filmmaking and cinema overall. And I feel like one thing I think is maybe lending to this is that, I mean, I've been saying for some time now, and a lot of people also, but comic book movies, that bubble's gonna pop. That was the trend up until very recently. And I think like moviegoers and just like the general public want like something new and refreshing in theaters. And I feel like this was the perfect opportunity to get a little bit of like, you know, two very different things at what, like both like at the same time. And I think that really appealed to a lot of people that have been wanting to see something good since the last of the good Avengers movies. Yeah, with
these two movies combined, this was the biggest movie weekend since Endgame. So it is very interesting that like this movie combination has kind of like beaten out literally every single superhero movie that has come since then. And these films that like, I don't know how much Barbie cost, but like as far as like the other superhero films that are like $200 million budgets and like all of these like bloated budgets that don't necessarily, that we can't really see where they go. Like look at Flash, like that movie with how much money they spent on it, and the CGI looks nonsense so bad that they have to like retroactively create an explanation as to why Barry looks weird in this world. It's just like it's crazy that I feel like Hollywood has gotten to a point where they are unable to accurately assess how much things necessarily should be costing or how much money should be put into certain projects.
Seems a little
like
fishy, and that's why we're having strikes.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. I think that's part of it. Like the fact that they are willing to like put hundreds of millions of dollars into the production of a single film, but they want to rush the CGI and like give these creators as limited a time as possible so that they can turn it out as quickly as possible. It's like, where is all that money going if they can't?
And if they're not compensating the talent, they're not
Mhm.
compensating the teams that are putting the film together.
Right.
So it's like, it's kind of bringing it all to light. And I think, no studio is going to want to hear like, oh, we want like reduced budgets for films. But it's like, the general audience like wish that was the case. Like, look at all these successful films with like way less budget. Like, look at Everything Everywhere. Like, look at some of
Right.
these indie projects that people love. Like, we need to go back to that because
like low key and
yeah.
like except like ignoring all of the other like political stuff around but The Sound of Freedom, this movie that has only like a 10 or 12 million dollar budget, making $100 million that the studios didn't want to promote. It's like it's so interesting to see that, like, yeah, there are like all of these examples of like these films that don't have a huge budget, but they're able to create so much cultural hype around it. Actually, how much did Barbie cost? I'm gonna look into that. I'm curious now, but I think Oppenheimer couldn't have been that expensive.
Yeah, especially since Christopher Nolan didn't even use CGI. So
horror movies never really have a big budget, but people still love them.
yeah. But that's just an interesting thing to think, and and that's like a really big positive. Another thing is just because like even movie theaters in general, it's kind of like it's been knowing that people have going less to the movie theaters. So I think that just this being a spectacle, and it goes back to what we mentioned about Barbie, how people were like they're all dressing up, and like even some people are like, oh, I want to go this time wearing like my pink bra and all this other stuff. It's like it's such a cool thing that we're getting with movies, and I'm hoping
Oppenheimer was like 100 million. So I like, with the amount of A-list actors in that movie, it is impressive that they were all that it was only 100 million. But yeah, like the whole craze over superhero films and sequels and cinematic universes, I feel like it seems like the cracks are being created, and that more and more of these other projects are hopefully going to be able to come to light because of something like Barbie and Oppenheimer. So
yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
For sure.
I think we were joking about it earlier, like the fact that Mattel greenlit all these like projects about random toys and properties that they own. I think that's a very like obvious like money grab. I don't think like people like audiences will really like that as much. So it's just kind of like weird. Like, you can't replicate this cultural moment. I don't think it's going to happen again, to be honest, but I know the studios are going to try to create it again, and that's going to be really painful to watch, honestly. Like, you can't organically like make these memes like this, or like make something like so weird again that people are going to be like, oh,
Can
you speak? Oh, Crystal, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I think your mic died in the middle of your sentence.
What was the last thing I said?
Okay. Creating something weird, the studios.
Yeah, I just think it's like the same thing with like do you remember the Minions movie, and then like all the gentle minions, like all of the like young men that would like show up to the last Minions movie in like suits, like that's not something that you can just like throw money at and create a moment like that, like just make a project that's good, right? And be transparent about like the budget and the filmmaking and be authentic about it, and the people will come. Like that's really all there is to it. And it's, I think the worst thing to do is like be inauthentic about something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And pay the writers.
Yeah.
Make sure the writers,
above all else, just compensate the people that are actually making these things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Any last thoughts?
I am curious because like we're talking about the future of the that these films have on like the effect that they have. I know that you've been to a couple of the protests for like the writer's strike. What's your experience been with that?
It's been interesting because it's like, well, for starters, first I was there before it became the actors being part of the strike, and even then it was still interesting just to hearing the stories of how writers, the way they get compensated, the way they get paid, and how like the industries have changed. Because like back in the day, if you worked on like a TV, like if you work on a TV show, it used to be network television, so that you were gonna be making money for a while, because the network television, they would like end during the, like they'll have breaks during like the summer and the summer and winter. So during those times, the writers will have breaks, and then they'll come back for another season. And then now, because of streaming, things have changed, because it's like with streaming, it's like the residuals are different. You don't really get residuals for streaming shows versus when it was on network television. So things like that have changed. And then even with actors, actors, I think, is even worse, because it's like if you're not a big name actor, you can work on a show for one, maybe even a movie. You work on one movie, you may never hear from you again. So you're just trying to find work. And even when you find work, it's like you only get paid for that moment. You're not getting paid consistently. So that's been my experience from it. But I think the bright side of everything is just, if things do go really well, this is going to make a big change for many people who don't have to deal with that struggle of like trying to make it ends meet and like doing odd jobs just so they can fill in and try to make it a scene. So I think that would be, but what's even curious is like, just like that episode of Black Mirror, they really are trying to have virtual, one actor comes in and then they can virtually scan them and then forever known whenever they want to do like
they have
extra.
Your likeness and they can use it at your expense forever,
so doing that
without compensating you.
And apparently the studio's goal now is just like, they're trying to make sure they're waiting for the actors to go like homeless, basically. That's their goal. They're just like, we're gonna wait out until they get homeless. That's their goal now. So
yeah, dang, it sucks. I mean, I guess it's weird to like be too attached to these studios, but it sucks that like, oh yeah, Disney wants to make people homeless. It's just like, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. It's like
all of them too, which sucks.
Yeah,
it's like
Disney,
it's
Netflix.
Hard. I have to like, oh my god, like what streaming
even
services
DC,
am I gonna cancel right now? Like,
yeah, the new guy who's taking over DC is like, man, Zaslav.
Like, what do I do while I eat now? Like, I have to watch a YouTube video. Like, what do I do in my free time? I have to game.
Hopping onto anime.
Gosh, dang it.
Yeah.
Reading books.
I mean, as of now, the actors are not, or the writers are not demanding people to boycott the shows. But eventually, if it comes down to it, they'll start saying boycott them. But as far as support goes, just, their biggest thing is just whatever you can to support the strike, just giving a call out or a shout out to things. But I did notice that some like YouTube reactors are starting to stop watching shows just because of it. So
yeah, a lot of I follow like a lot of actors on Instagram that I'm a fan of, and a lot of them are like, canceled all my streaming services, and I'm like, oh my god, should I do that? I'm like, eventually maybe, because I do feel like it's important, and I think you know it's unfair for like only a couple people at the very, very top to even see any of the revenue that's coming in. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And it's sad because like even now with like, it'd been cooler if with Oppenheimer, if we get to see, it was only just Christopher Nolan who would go in an interview kind of promoting his movie. I mean, granted, the movie still did well besides that, but I'm just curious how many movies are even going to do well anymore if the actors are not really going to go out there and be like, oh, you should watch my movie,
It's sad. Like I said, I follow a lot of actors on Instagram, and it's kind of sad to see them like upload a video like, hey, this is like my last video, I have to like stop promoting this film, in solidarity, I want to be on the right side of history, but we worked really hard and I hope you guys still watched in theaters. It's like, it sucks. It's sad to see, like, you know, they probably had a whole promotional tour lined up. I'm talking actually specifically about Xolo Maridueño from like Blue Beetle.
Yeah, I know.
But I also saw like some of the like voice actors from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and just like
Aw.
other things, and I'm like, these are like young actors, and this is gonna affect their careers. Like, I don't know. So just, you know, still support films and stuff like that where you can, but don't expect to see any promotional stuff. At least professional.
It'll be interesting because I know that some of the stuff that is actually still continuing to film right now are things that are independent films that
Isn't
have
Deadpool still.
No, they quit it after
I don't
that.
think-
After the
did?
after the actors had the strike, because the writers originally they just were like, we're just continuing with the actors, but after the actors strike, they stopped.
Okay, good.
But I think
because that was
some-
going to be the worst movie ever if they continued.
I think some of the independent films are continuing because they have an allowance, I think, from SAG-AFTRA specifically, because those independent studios are willing to adhere to the demands of the unions, and so I think that's cool. We might get some cool stuff out of the more independent films and more independent shows circuit. So hopefully that might, you know, build up some gems. You never know.
Yeah, we love to see an indie film
Mm-hmm.
and an indie project.
Yeah. All right. So if you have any thoughts about Barbenheimer, the effects of the film industry, the strike, definitely let us know in the comments below, and we will catch you later.
Peace.
Peace. I have 5 minutes to spare.